Hey, world history students. This is Miss Ray. Today, we'll be looking at the civilizations of Athens and Rome. Remember as we go through this presentation that you only need to copy the things written in black. You do not have to write out our objectives or anything in other colors. So what we're really going to look at is the contributions that each of those civilizations made on modern democracy. First, we will look at Athens. Greece is often referred to as the birthplace of democracy, but in fact, it was the city-state in Greece, called Athens, that is responsible for the contributions we'll discuss today. Greece is a mountainous country and also a peninsula into the Mediterranean Sea. You can see from the map here. As a mountainous country with people cut off from one another, remember, no technology, no phones, it was very difficult to unify under a single government. So Greece developed small independent communities called city-states. Most city-states controlled between about 50 and 500 miles of territory. You can see on this map Sparta, you can see Thebes, you can see Marathon, and you can see the fabulous Athens. In the center of the city-state, there was sometimes a fortified hilltop, like in this map here, called an acropolis, where male citizens gathered to conduct business. The city-state of Athens would go through several different types of government systems, from a monarchy to an aristocracy to an oligarchy when wealthy merchants were unhappy with the nobility. The power struggles between the rich and the poor led to reforms or changes, hopefully improvements in the government, which led to a democracy or a rule by the people. The biggest reformer was a leader named Cleisthenes. He reformed Athens to make it a full democracy, reorganizing the assembly to break up the power of the nobles. His reforms allowed citizens to participate in government, even suggesting laws to debate on and voting on passing them. However, because only 20% of people in Athens were citizens, only a small percentage of people there participated. Citizenship in Athens was considered a privilege and a serious responsibility. The only people who could be citizens were males, people who were born free, and people who were actually from Athens, born in Athens. They considered people who were born outside of Athens to be foreigners and barbarians. The Athenians took the responsibilities of citizenship very seriously. Please be sure to copy the responsibilities of citizens in Athens. Some of them may look familiar to you. When a man turned 18, he was expected to complete 2 years of military service. He was expected to complete 2 years of training and serve in the military. Citizens were also expected to participate in government by swearing an oath to the city and joining the assembly. Citizens were required to vote. And education was very important because you couldn't be an active citizen if you couldn't have debates on subjects. One of the subjects that you learned in school was actually called rhetoric, which is the art of public speaking. You would also be expected to serve on juries and participate in political decisions. However, there were some definite problems with democracy in Athens. If all the men in the city were participating in government, who would do the work? So democracy encouraged slavery because they needed slaves to do the work while the men were participating in government. Another problem with democracy was that women were not allowed to participate because they were not considered citizens. In fact, women had male guardians and most had to marry young between the ages of 14 and 16. Yikes! Of course, your parents would have chosen your spouse. There were very few citizens that participated because of the restrictions on who could be a citizen. You may remember something from Greece and Athens called the Golden Age that perhaps you learned about in either 6th or 7th grade. The leader during the Golden Age in Athens was a man named Pericles. Pericles was honest and fair, and as a result was very popular. He held support for 32 years. To strengthen the democracy, Pericles increased the number of paid offices and paid juries to allow poor citizens to participate. Under Pericles, the direct democracy was introduced. Citizens ruled directly instead of through representatives. One person equals one vote. Everyone's vote counted. It's no coincidence that during the Golden Age, the arts and intellectual ideas were very important. In fact, three of the most famous citizens of Athens were the philosophers Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Socrates was the teacher of Plato, who was the teacher of Aristotle. The way I tell students to remember who was the teacher of whom is to remember the word spa, S-P-A. The first letters of their names form that word spa, and they go in that order. These philosophers encouraged citizens to question authorities and the decisions that they made. Eventually, this would give citizens more power. So now what we've all been waiting for are the contributions of Athens. The contributions that democracy gets from Athens is that it gave us the first example and the only example of a direct democracy. Also, the Athenians set up a voting system with a ballot box. You can see the photograph here at the bottom with the white and black stones, one representing votes for, one representing votes against whatever they were voting on. The Athenians also defined the roles and responsibilities of a citizen and took that role very seriously. Another important contribution was the development of the court system, or the judicial system, with juries to decide guilt or innocence. Lastly, they set the standards for politics and philosophy, where the idea of questioning authority came from the leaders and the philosophers at the time. This notion of questioning will be really evident when we get to the Renaissance and Reformation. It's really important that you copy down the contributions, so if you need to pause the video here to do so, please do. We're going to move on to Rome next. Rome develops a republic. Rome is a city in the country of Italy, and like Greece, their neighbor in the Mediterranean Sea, Italy is a peninsula country. We'll get to the map here. Here we go. This is the map of Italy. Some of you probably recognize this. The founding of Rome is based on a myth. The reality, let me show you Rome. Rome is right here. The reality is that Rome was a good place to settle because the location was near the water and it had very fertile soil. This made it a great area not only for agriculture, but also for trade. The Latins who formed Rome were known for believing in duty, discipline, and patriotism, or a love of their country. Even though the Republic lasted only 600 years, they kept many democratic values of citizenship and rights as they became a vast empire with a single ruler. In the early history of Rome, the Etruscans, who you may remember from 6th grade, had control of Rome. The Roman aristocrats resented the Etruscan kings and drove them out. They declared a new government and they vowed they would never be ruled by kings again. They formed a new government called a republic and would elect representatives to make decisions. Different groups or classes of people struggled for power early on. These groups were called the patricians, or wealthy landowners, the plebeians, who were the farmers, merchants, and artisans that made up the majority, and there were, of course, slaves who were either bought or captured in war. In place of a king, the republic had a senate which could make laws. There was also an assembly, which had less power than the Senate, but eventually won the power to make laws as well. The US government also has a two-house system with a Senate and an assembly called the House of Representatives. Rome also had two officials that were called consuls. They carried out the laws or administered the laws, including commanding the army and directing the government. However, their power was limited. They did have the power to veto or say no to proposed laws or even to each other. This consul position is similar to a president or a prime minister today. In a time of crisis, the republic could elect a dictator who could be one of the two consuls, who had absolute power to make laws and command the army. Dictators were supposed to have a power of only 6 months.
When the Romans overthrew their Etruscan rulers in the year 509 BCE, they weren't just changing their political status. They were establishing a form of government that would influence politics for thousands of years to come. Upon freeing themselves from the conquering Etruscans of the north, the Romans formed a republic, a system of government in which citizens choose representatives to govern on their behalf. With this, they established a governmental system which was a precursor to many in our modern-day world. To understand the political structure of the Roman Republic, we must first understand the importance of social class. The natural-born inhabitants of the Republic, who were not slaves, were broken into two main groups. They were the patricians, members of the upper class, including the nobility and wealthy landowners, and the plebeians, or the common people of Rome. Unlike today's society, where people can move up and down the social ladder, the patricians and plebeians of Rome were completely separate and distinct. Intermarriage between the classes was forbidden, making these social classes even more of a dividing line. Whether a man was a patrician or a plebeian dictated what position he could hold within the beginning political structure of the republic. If a man was a patrician, he could hold the highest position in government, known as consul. Since this position oversaw the workings of the government and its officials, while also being the commander of the army outside the city of Rome, we can draw some loose parallels to it and the American presidency. However, unlike the presidency, two patrician men ruled as consul. They had the power to veto one another and were limited to a one-year term. In times of crisis, and in order to make swift, concise decisions, one man could be elevated to dictator over the republic. Trying to make sure the patricians could keep control, the consuls were elected from the Senate, a group of 300 patricians who were in essence the lawmakers of Rome. They made decisions on spending while also controlling taxation and relationships with foreign powers. Again, we can loosely compare the Roman Senate to the legislative branch of the American government. However, there are some major differences. Perhaps most obvious, the senators of Rome were not chosen by the citizens. They were chosen by the consul, and they were elected for life. The last governing body of the Roman Republic was the Assembly. The Assembly allowed plebeians or common citizens into its membership. Like the First Amendment right to assemble, the Assembly had the right to assemble in the Forum, or the marketplace and business center of Rome. Fortunately for the Assembly, they had one ace up their sleeve. As the Republic aged, they were in charge of choosing the consul. Yes, the consuls were elected from the Senate, but not by the Senate. The honor of choosing went to the Assembly. Since the Assembly chose the consuls, any senator hoping to gain the highest position in government needed to win the favor of the Assembly. Just imagine a wealthy patrician courting a common plebeian. This setup allowed the wealthier plebeians, who were not patricians no matter how much money they made, to wield substantial power. It was politics at its best. With this setup, it's not hard to imagine why the Assembly gained power. They were also given the right to elect tribunes, a position which acted very much like a president of the plebeians. The man holding this position had the right to intervene on legal matters and veto legislation. He also held the right to summon the Senate, even making proposals for their consideration. Between 449 and 450 BCE, the plebeians of Rome gained another victory through the Law of the 12 Tables. These were a code of laws which spelled out civil matters, crime and punishment, and relationships among citizens and family members. Most important about these new laws, both patricians and plebeians were bound by them. Soon following the law of the 12 tables, the assembly had gained such power that plebeians were given the right to marry patricians, and even a plebeian could be consul. Ironically, the growing power of the assembly would be blamed for the fall of the republic.
Okay, back to our presentation. The Roman Republic eventually collapsed. The Roman Republic went about conquering much of Italy. Attempting to control so much territory eventually caused divisions between the rich and the poor and led to a civil war that would lead to the rise of a dictator named Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar was not willing to give up his control after his 6-month terms. You may have heard the quote, "Power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely." And eventually, some senators plotted against him and assassinated him on March 15th, called the Ides of March. His death caused another civil war that destroyed what was left of the Republic. But fortunately for us, the contributions of the Roman Republic were lasting, and the modern world benefits from many of those today. Get ready. Now we have the contributions that you've all been waiting for. Rome provided the first example of a republic, or a representative government. From that government, we still use language today like Senate, dictator, veto, which means the power to reject laws. As you saw in the video, Rome also had a code of rules or laws that applied to the different classes, called the 12 tables. Lastly, Rome showed other civilizations that breaking up governmental power into different groups, like the Senate and the Assembly and the consuls, prevented one person from gaining too much power, one person or group from gaining too much power. This is how the US government is organized today, with 3 branches of government: the legislative, judicial, and executive. Be sure you get all these contributions written down. Again, if you need to stop the video here, please do so. Okay, discussion questions for the next time you meet in class. Be sure to think about the questions here, and I would actually write out answers to them so that you're ready to answer them in class. Think about all the things that the Athenian society contributed to modern democracy. Remember that Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle were so important, getting people to question authorities, which is going to come up over and over again as we see democracy evolve. And also consider which Roman contribution you think was the most significant. As you examine your life and your notes, remember what Socrates would say in one of his most famous quotes: "The unexamined life is not worth living." Have a good day.